Welcome back to the Burning Bush podcast, episode 4. My name is Spencer.
I'm Sean.
I'm Zach.
And we have our first guest here. Sorry. This is Zach's AP World History teacher at our school. This is Mr. Houle. You can introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mr. Houle. I'm Zach's AP World History teacher. I'm real happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So, just because you are here and you are or Zach's World History teacher, we would be talking this episode about history and just how certain aspects of history can affect predictions about the future of the world, both in America and outside politics, and just how that all comes together. So we have a couple talking points. We can start now about the possible misconceptions people have about history. I can just start off for a second. A couple days ago in class, we were talking about World War II and how during the war, it actually got a lot closer to America than people realized. For instance, Alaska was almost completely not in America's control throughout the entire war, and that was completely swept under the rug.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone really knew about it, which just kind of goes to show how I would say, just for me, it made me lose a lot of trust in America, or just in made me think more about what I'm letting get to my head and how stuff I hear affects the way I think about stuff. Yeah, totally.
Well, you can kind of open your perspective and kind of see how other countries teach their students. And
yeah,
they're gonna get taught different stuff than we are.
I mean,
it's better to kind of put yourself in the middle.
It's all about what's considered brainwashing and what's considered education.
Yeah.
I think especially, I don't know if you want to touch on this, but with American education, it's a lot more streamlined and basic just because it's a more, I'd say, freer country than what I would assume a lot of other ones are. But again, I don't know that for sure.
No, yeah. I'll tell you this, that when I was growing up, U.S. history what was taught was called the grand narrative.
Okay.
It was the greatness of America, the mistakes were certainly not highlighted, right?
Right.
But I see today, and talking to the U.S. history teachers here and at other schools I've worked at, it's very different from when I was a kid. We see the mistakes the United States has made. If you don't see the mistakes, I mean, there's no way to correct the behavior, right? So I think it's important that the mistakes are taught, and they're taught to a much greater degree than when I was a kid.
No, I totally agree with that. I've brought stuff up with my parents about that, and this is completely regardless of what I actually think of the country and its past, but just there are a lot of things I know that don't shed America in the best light. That my parents wouldn't know. Speaking of which, just a lot of that stuff goes to show how much if you look at a bunch of different countries and nations throughout history, you see that they all sort of follow one of 6 or 7 basic narratives. There's feudalism and totalitarianism and absolutism, and just certain patterns that I'd say a lot of countries or a lot of empires follow, usually all around the same time. So there's one period of time where they're all feudalist countries and they're all totalitarianist countries at another time, or I'm using countries and empires in a different sense, but I think now we're kind of at the time of post what is it called, Enlightenment, and the individual is really important now, which then goes into a bit more dangerous territory of it's probably going to be a lot harder to actually affect the status of empires and countries now. I think I could be wrong.
Due to individualism itself?
Just because individualism is so strong, and because the individual has much more power than I think it might have in the past, it'll be way less likely for people to be easily manipulated and easily affected and have their beliefs changed more, because we're all kind of living in our own world now.
Yeah.
Especially with technology, which is another key point I thought we would touch on.
If we could stay on that topic for just a second, I think something you brought up something really interesting. And when you say sort of post-Enlightenment, right? So the Enlightenment bringing the philosophies of the Renaissance and stuff like humanism, individualism, secularism, these things on the rise. I agree that the West, right? Because we're really talking about the West, I think, more than anything here, right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you agree? The West affected by individualism, humanism, secularism. Let's take those three. That on the rise, I agree with you 100% that the individual has gained so much more power. And also look at the amount of knowledge the individual can gain. You have it right here, right? The internet. We have all of human knowledge probably at our fingertips.
Yep.
So I would say this: there's a danger, I think, in individualism for a country. Let's say, can we agree there that certainly a collective, if a country is more of collectivist, that the ideals can be shared, and the country may be stronger in that sense. But if a society is brought up with education as a foundation, and if it is expected that the individual in individualism educate themselves, I would argue the country can be stronger.
I would argue that too, depending on the type of education we're receiving. Public education, obviously, I don't have too much of a gripe with that, or at least if I do, we're not going to talk about it here. But you can receive a lot of misguided or just say misguided brainwashing material just from the internet, and it sort of leads to a lot of echo chambers forming around people who just surround themselves with their own opinions, and no one's going to change their mind with that. That does lead to people being manipulated a lot less, and the collectivist ideology shrinks. But also, you're seeing it here in America. It grows to two polar opposites, and I don't have any experience really looking at politics prior to the 2016 election, but just based on that, I'd say American politics is incredibly divided. I don't know if it's been more or less divided in the past, but I can say now it's very hard to have a conversation with someone my age who disagrees with me politically without it getting either shut down or
ending in hatred kind
of. Shouting.
Well, I mean, if you go back to all the way to George Washington, he said we shouldn't make two parties.
Yeah.
And then now it's if you're in one party or the other, you can't really mix as much. It's
because the whole root behind that is despite what we agree is different about how to, I think the main goal of everyone should be how can we make our nation a more prosperous, better nation. But then it's sort of gotten into this weird phase where both sides believe that the other side doesn't want that and truly is evil at heart.
And this all comes back to the first episode we were talking about how with the use of the internet, how you can just see whatever side you'd want to.
Right.
I can say in my experience, I'm 47.
Okay.
I count. In my experience, this is the most divided I've ever seen it. And to your point about the two sides, what's really odd about it, and I back away from it. My wife is a professor of journalism. So I watch, here's what I do when I go home. I watch Fox, I watch MSNBC, I listen to NPR, and I watch CNN, and my wife's following Twitter. Okay, I'm hearing as much, I try to get all the information I can.
Yeah.
And something you brought up that I wanted to hit on, it used to be that you might say, my opponent does want what's best for America. We just disagree on what that is, on how that is going to happen.
Yeah.
That's not what either side is doing anymore. You're absolutely right. And it's like football hatred.
Yeah.
I hate the Dallas Cowboys. Do I really hate the Dallas Cowboys? No.
Yeah.
But yes, I do hate the Dallas Cowboys, and it's fun to hate the Dallas Cowboys, and I hate that star. It's fun.
Yeah.
Isn't it fun? It's turned into that when that absolutely makes no sense.
I don't know how much information you have about the Civil War, but that's got to be I don't think we're close to another Civil War, but there have been times when I've thought like it feels like more and more like we are living in two separate countries, like the cities and the more rural areas, because generally the cities are more liberal and the rural areas are more conservative. Obviously there are exceptions, but like if that becomes more escalated, it's going to lead to, or it could lead to a physical disagreement.
Well, it's always been that way too in history, that people in the cities are more liberal than the people in the country.
Yeah.
You're forced into, like a place like Houston, one of the most diverse cities in the world.
Yeah.
We're forced together. We're forced to learn how to deal with one another here.
Yeah.
I don't want to go too deep into that one, but
Yeah.
that's, yes, the cities tend to be more liberal, that is for sure. But it seems by design. Because if you listen to the left, they're spouting the same kind of stuff the right is, in the sense that the other side is evil.
Yes.
Right? But do you think when they get behind when Nancy Pelosi and
Nancy
Pelosi and Trump are talking on the phone, they're not
They're not
talking
going
the
to
way
be
they
like,
do.
I hate you, you're evil.
I think that could be used to like help the hatred that I think Trump and Pelosi and like all these politicians are fueling the people could also be used to like help control us and put us in these two separate echo chambers, because while they are like separate and it like creates tension, it could also be just a way for Trump to say this to his people and get everyone behind him, and Pelosi to get say something and get her people behind her. And while it is two separate spheres of control, the people are still under control. They just each have a scapegoat.
I see it like each of the people that are on top are going to say some things, but they're not going to say what the people that support them say, because the people that support them can take it to an extreme. Like, I kind of see it as people call Trump Hitler, and they're like, oh my God, he's a Nazi, because some of the people that support him do some anti-Semitist movements. But he doesn't do anything of the sort.
Right.
Like, for example, a KKK leader could follow Trump, but that doesn't mean Trump is the other way around.
Right. I mean that's true.
They're good people on both sides. You remember when he said that? It's some of the base for sure. I'm sure it's a small percentage, but he's sort of acting as a populist, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't he?
Back a little bit to the like future of America based on the divide. A lot of the times when I've seen like in class, like the reasons for the collapse of empires, like the Byzantines, the Ottomans, and stuff like that, a lot of it was either invasion or internal tension.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're at risk of invasion right now. I think it's pretty safe to say that. But just seeing, I don't have any true thing to measure when it comes to comparing the severity of America's internal conflict versus the severity of like any other internal conflict in the history of the world.
Well, if we want to overlay, and I was thinking about this today, you guys asked me about on the show, I was thinking about what could I say? So I was writing some things down that I thought might be interesting for this. If we take, because for me I take Rome as the overlay. Like even when I look at the fall of the Han Empire in China or Gupta, it doesn't matter, the Byzantines. I sort of overlay Western Rome. Because they've become the poster child for a very strong empire that falls for nearly the same reasons all the rest of them are going to fall. And here's what I was thinking. So when we talk about the fall of Rome, now if you want to compare this to the United States, you guys can do that. But here's what I'm saying. Bad emperors, they call them bad emperors. And what you're talking about is, after Aurelius and these guys are out, you're talking about emperors that don't seem to care about the people. All right, and that takes a bunch of different forms, but emperors that don't care about the people any longer. If you read the writings of Marcus Aurelius, the last good emperor of Rome, if you want to call him that, he did care about the people. Now, did he, lay waste to his enemies and salt the earth? Of course he did. It's Rome. You have to do things like that, don't you? But after Aurelius, you hit a bunch of bad emperors, so you can do what you like with that one. And I wrote down Nero and Caligula, writing down things they did, but could we say we have bad emperors now? Is the government corrupt? I don't know.
It's just gotten, you're just like when you say bad emperors, like emperors who would rather see personal gain over the actual prosperity of the nation.
Absolutely. Okay. Then you look at economic problems. I mean, most of the reasons why empires fall, you could just suss it out by thinking. If the economy's going great, your empire's not going to fall.
Yeah.
Right. So bad economy, but what that took the form of is high taxes and people who couldn't pay those high taxes, right?
Yeah.
And massive spending by leaders.
Okay.
Okay. So in the United States, if I was going to try to equate, I could look at, if I look at the spending of the United States and I see what we've borrowed. You see my point?
Yes.
The problems we're going to have with Social Security. Both sides admit to this. There is going to be a problem when the bill comes due.
Absolutely.
Right?
I know almost for a fact none of us three are going to really see a lot of Social Security benefits.
It's interesting you say that because my wife and I'm at 47, we think probably it's possible same thing.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, I think it's important as a citizen of the country to prepare yourself for that idea. You know, have an escape plan, but with money-wise, you know, to where maybe you don't have to rely on it. We'll see. I have enough faith in some of the leaders. I think something will get done. We'll see about it. But economic problems are another reason for the fall of empire. So apply that to the United States at will.
So I would say, if we can touch on that a bit more,
Yeah.
the economic state of America, while we are in like trillions of dollars in debt, which isn't good, the overall like GDP, unemployment rate, I'd say taking those types of factors into account, I wouldn't say we're that bad.
Right.
And I think one of the main reasons because of that is just because we've continued to allow the economy to just like work itself out, I think. Because I think
Well, have we?
if we're talking about like compared to like World War I efforts and the rise of like Mussolini and fascism, a lot of the times they end up trying to fix the economy and use that sort of incentive. They kind of, I would say,
So top down versus bottom up?
they use bad economies to fuel their support because they claim that they can fix the economy of whatever nation they're in. I think Hitler did that. I think Mussolini did that. And according to my teacher, apparently they did, at least for a short term. Apparently, like at the beginning of the Nazi Party's rule, the economy slowly started to get better. Same
In Germany, you're talking about?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that as long as we make sure that that isn't like,
Hasn't every president that I've ever seen claimed they're going to fix the economy?
right.
I think they're all using it.
Yeah. It's like it's a tactic people will use to garner support, but just when we let it get to the point where whatever Hitler's like 5-year deal was, where he's allowed to be dictator for 5 years in order to fix the economy.
Yeah.
It just like people are so willing to give up power to make sure that is resolved. So I think it's really important for Americans to realize it isn't always the best idea to give up control or power
For quote-unquote
in exchange
security.
for security.
And this can go back to the thing where we talked about whether the person wanting power actually wants to benefit the whole country or themselves.
Right.
Because if they're promising these things, they could be promising them just because the people want to hear it.
Yeah.
And they'll get elected and they'll be ruler and they can do whatever they want.
Have y'all heard of somebody named Andrew Yang?
Yeah.
He's a politician running in 2020, and his main flagship promise is that he wants to create like a new deal that will give every American over the age of 18 $1,000 per month.
Oh, UBI.
Yeah.
Universal Basic Income.
Which-
that's been floated around before. That's an interesting thought, isn't
Do
it?
you know if that's ever come up?
I think they've tried it. Now, don't quote me here. Well, you have to quote me. I'm on a microphone. I think it was floated around in one of the Scandinavian countries at one point. Now, I don't know.
At one point being like 100 years ago?
No. Even semi-recently, the idea was Finland. Did Finland talk about UBI? I don't know. So somebody can Google it, huh?
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, I don't remember. That's something that the far left talks about fairly frequently. And philosophically, it's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
It certainly flies in the face of the economic system that we would have in the United States. Sort of an Adam Smith,
Whether
laissez-faire,
or not
hands
we'll
off.
use it
Right?
correctly.
I don't think it would go well in synchronicity with the Constitution. I don't know the Constitution by heart, but a lot of that is like keeping the government limited and making sure that the government doesn't have the control, because again, if the government can give you something, it can take it away, which would then leave the government the ability to press a button and completely destroy the economy and send it into mass chaos.
I don't think there's any candidate, even like Sanders, as far left as Sanders could be. I think he has floated out a little bit. I don't even think they buy that.
Right.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know that I buy it either, but
It's still,
hey man, give me $1,000. Let me try it.
Yeah.
It all comes back, to just like claiming you're gonna solve something and giving people that promise of resolving a failed state, to then either bring it into, I'd say, the wrong type of prosperity, such as, again, Mussolini and Hitler, or just going further into the wrong side of the rabbit hole.
Economics through war machine.
Yeah.
Hitler, Mussolini, right? Building the economy
Right.
with no other choice but to use it.
I mean, the only reason apparently that Hitler decided to branch out and start invading these countries was, I'd say, for two reasons. One, to restore the faith and passion of Germany to its original glory by taking back its landmass, which is again or creating a sense of nationalism to like give people that support.
Well, both, right?
Yeah.
Lieberstrom, he wants living space.
And I'd say one ties into the other.
And nationalism for certain.
So I think that's kind of also a big reason why I think, I don't know if this is true, but I'd say the global political atmosphere seems to be sort of like settling down, because it seems there aren't a lot of super huge global conflicts compared to what we've seen 100 years ago in World War II.
Right, perhaps more proxy war stuff.
Right. I don't think there was something I heard. It's probably not true, but it just kind of made me think. There are like there are fewer actual like declared wars now than there have been in like a long time. I don't know where I saw.
We know
like,
what could happen if someone
Yes.
decides to declare war.
like we
Nuclear
now have the
weapons
power.
changed the game.
Yes.
Nuclear weapons changed the
People
game.
realize that it could destroy whole countries.
We're in an unwritten part of history.
Yeah, now everybody's in the mutual assured destruction. with
Yeah.
all the nuclear
Everyone's
weapons.
realized that having those type of weapons.
Read Gore Vidal's Perpetual War for Perpetual Peace. That's my advice.
Okay. Can you highlight any of the topics?
Just read.
in there?
Just read. I probably read the book 25 years ago.
Yeah.
I just remember going, yeah, man. That's
Right.
So we were on economy, right?
Yes.
Do we want to go through some of the other Fall of Empire stuff?
We can. I didn't write this down beforehand, but it'd be cool if we have time, or if we want to touch on it. It's within reason to assume that in the distant future, our species will turn to other planets. And that sounds very like crazy and radical, but like the farther and farther you get down, I would assume that it's eventually going to happen unless we destroy ourselves before we do that. And with that comes other crazy economic and political power struggles, which I think would be comparable to the discovery of the New World, in like the slave trade, the Columbian Exchange, and that could lead to, in the same way, America becoming a huge superpower. What if, let's say, the colony of Mars like turns into the most powerful race or empire of humans in our species? Because we can't say the world anymore. I just think it's an interesting thing to talk
We
about.
have to get off the planet eventually, don't we?
Yeah, we're gonna run out of
We're
resources.
already going to Mars
Right.
pretty soon, so
People think global warming, something's going to push us
other
up the
planets will
planet.
eventually will go to too, I'd assume.
Yeah.
Have you ever watched any of Elon Musk's TED Talks, any of that stuff?
I've listened to a lot of his interviews. I wouldn't say his TED Talks.
He's great. Like if you, why he's great. He touches on this all the time, and he believes that we have to and will go to other planets.
Well, we're going to run out of natural resources eventually, and we're going to overpopulate ourselves.
They think we're going to level off at about 12
Billion?
Yeah, they say they think we're going to level off. The more educated a society, educated quote unquote, Western education probably, right? But the society becomes, the less kids we have. You know, the more, and globalization is causing like a sort of, I mean, even you look at China, there's a westernization that is occurring.
Yeah.
The Western idea, for the most part, as collective as China is even, but the Western idea is going around. And I think the population will level.
I think that's what happened when the Cold War just sort of broke out. It was the fight between the East and the West, and it just sort of happened that the West won.
Yeah.
People want
Yeah.
entertainment, man.
No, totally. They want something to do.
Yeah.
It totally blew my mind that my old teacher said this, or my teacher said this a couple days or weeks ago. He said, like, now in the first time in history, talking about like the 1910s and 1920s, like people had something to do, which was like, it totally threw me back.
Go to the ball game, go to the boxing match.
Like it was entertainment became a major industry for the first time ever, because before that,
Well, the Romans.
well, yes,
Yeah.
but I'm talking more like survival and like sustaining yourself economically didn't become like the main thing you had to do. And like the middle class started coming up with like a regular income.
It was like a thing you did on the side.
Yeah,
And now
completely.
you can like make a living off of being an entertainer.
So like all this like huge expansion of culture that we've seen with commercialism and stuff like that, it's like super new. Like we've really never seen much of anything like this in the past, in America or other parts of the world aside from Rome. So why do you think, we can touch on that, like why do you think Rome specifically had that sort of same entertainment-centric society, and then just sort of fell out of the loop for like a couple hundred years, like, or a couple, I don't know, 6,
Longer.
7, a while.
I never thought of them as entertainment centric, but I will say, what did the Roman emperors, some of the bad Roman emperors, say the games were for? Bread and circuses, man.
Yeah.
Okay? If I entertain you with this hand, you don't see what this hand's doing.
Yeah.
That was part of what was going on in Rome. The games are free,
Yeah.
right?
So the diversion for something.
That's interesting. So it must be a lot easier for governments to make corrupt actions now that the people are just distracted on a level never seen before.
Well, I mean, I think we'd have to be. I think we'd have to be careful too, because it's so easy to look at some of this stuff and sort of see an intelligence behind it,
Yeah.
right? And I think that it's just sort of a natural thing. Humans, we want to be entertained. It's fun, you know, and we're doing it to ourselves. I don't think it needs much help. I mean, Netflix. My God, Netflix? Are you kidding me? I grew up there. When I was a kid, when I was your age, I don't know how many channels we had. We had just gotten cable, so oh my God, it was a huge issue. But prior to that, there was 5, 6 channels on TV, and that was it. So we read.
Yeah.
I didn't want to watch what was on Channel 8 at the time.
Yeah.
There was Saturday morning Sunday? I don't remember.
Saturday morning cartoon.
Yeah, whatever.
Space Ghost, man.
Did everybody just read back then?
Oh yeah. Well, we watched TV. We went outside when I was a little kid. We used to go outside and run around, play. But yeah, I read so many books because the TV was terrible. Was I going to watch soap operas in the summer?
So the only real information you were getting, going back to education, was from your parents and from school.
And books.
And like how I
Right.
talked about in the first episode, the only way you could talk to people was actually biking over to their house.
Yeah.
Saying, "Hey, is Charlie home?" And then you have to like knock on their door.
Oh, we did that
and
all the
mom will
time.
Pick up, yeah.
Right. That's from the first episode. It's just like very weird to think like that doesn't happen anymore. We don't really have that sort of purely personal communication.
We're getting more lazy with everything, and I feel like when Blockbuster closed, it's like I was like, whoa, Blockbuster's closing, because I used to go to Blockbuster all the time to play like random games, and now it's like come to the point where we can't even like drive over to a store. We just sit down on our couch and buy it from our TV. Wow, we're getting that lazy.
People have become more individualistic. Individualism at its core is on the rise. We don't spend all of our time, even when we're talking with friends, we are sitting alone on our bed. We are becoming primally like individual people.
I don't know how deep you want to get with that, but I'll say this, if I could throw this in about the individualism thing. We're at a point now, how interesting is this, right? And this, of course, these ideas have been going on for a long time, but how interesting is this that we're not really bringing up the real question half the time, which is there a reality that we share? Or is reality different?
It's like, is your red different from my red?
Oh, yeah. Sure, if you want to do the one-on-one version. But that's the real question, isn't it? Are we sharing a reality that we're seeing differently, or do we have different realities? Of course, philosophy debates this beginning of time, but this individualism thing that you're bringing up is at play in society in the sense that what I believe to be true is true for me. What you believe to be true is true for you. And someone who believes in an absolute reality will argue, no.
Yeah.
There is a truth that we are either right or wrong about.
That's like
very different things.
That's like Plato's philosophy.
Correct.
Yeah. It's not even are there multiple different realities or one reality that everyone lives in. There could be one reality that only I live in, and you guys are all just like objects in the reality that I have given personalities.
That's called solipsism. Yeah, right. I knew a kid. I taught philosophy at Sharpstown, and I had a kid when I was teaching philosophy. She was great. She goes, "Mr. Houle?" I said, "Yes." And she goes, and she was trying to say it. She goes, "You exist because of me." And I stopped class. I said, "What?" And everybody's looking at her. "You are here because of me." And the whole class went, whoa, and I went, "Let her go." And she just was working it out. And she finally, I said, "You are a solipsist." She goes, "What's that?" I explained. You think you're the only one that actually exists? She goes, "Right." And everybody went, "Oh my God."
Yeah.
But is it true?
Well, I can only say she's not in the room anymore, and I am. So.
There's another like theory that I read in a book somewhere at camp from a counselor. It was like the universe and our perception of the universe can only exist when the other exists. So if we cannot perceive the universe, there is no universe, and if there is no universe, we cannot perceive it. And just like they are built so fundamentally on each other that you can't really go anywhere without acknowledging that. And then if we can tie it all back around, that could, in a way, prove a sort of absolute truth, because we all need to be in perception of a singular universe instead of all being in perception of different universes, which would mean that we can't coexist.
Well, no, you can go.
No, please, go ahead.
Okay. While he was saying that, I was thinking about your thing with the student, and I'm like, okay, wait. If she's living her own life, and I'm here, that means her imagination isn't really just creating like what she's saying, because we're here too. But then what if you're saying that,
right,
and my imagination's creating it? But then if you go to that, then we have to think, how do we learn? If we don't already know something, how can it be taught to us if we're creating our own imagination?
Plato has an argument for that one too, yeah.
That's
true. Everything that we quote-unquote learn, we're not learning, we're remembering.
Whoa.
Yeah, Plato's happy. Love it.
Yeah. That's...
Wait, how'd they learn it the first time?
Jeez, we need to move to Rome in 600 BCE.
They believed that, Plato believed that before you're born, now where he's coming up with this, you got me. Plato believed that before you're born, you exist in what he called the realm of the forms, where truth exists. To put it easily, you were once where truth was.
Okay.
And you remember and he proved, if you read one of his dialogues, I think it's Euthyphro, I can't remember, he tries to prove it mathematically. It's really interesting. I suggest reading all Platonic dialogues. There you go.
So then as you grow up, you're kind of just like remembering stuff, and it's like, are you programmed to teach you?
Have you ever seen this stool before?
No.
Okay, but you know it's a stool, right?
Yeah.
Why?
Because there's an ideal version of a stool that we all base. I know exactly what you're talking
It
about.
participates in stoolness.
That's Plato.
There apparently is a ideal, true version of a stool
Yes.
that when you remember and you see that stool, you can make the comparison
Right.
that this is a physical form of that true version.
Right.
That all other stools also like meet the criteria of,
Right.
and therefore there is a real, true universe above ours made of true items and truth, just that we cannot really
Forms.
access yet.
The forms.
So does that go back to how people can be like reincarnated and then they reteach themselves that knowledge from their past life?
I don't know, man. Plato said that when you die, you go observe the forms.
It's so interesting. And he was, I don't remember what the order is. It was like Plato, it was like Socrates, then Plato, then Aristotle,
That's
right?
You mean time-wise? Yes, that's right.
And they each like tutored or mentored each other, right?
Socrates was the teacher of Plato, who was the teacher of Aristotle, who was the teacher of Alexander the Great.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So how did Aristotle take Plato's teachings and mix them?
He said, Plato, you're full of it.
Okay.
The thing that makes the stool is not up there. The thing that makes the stool is in the stool.
Okay. So just like a more secular humanist.
Certainly, there was only, like Plato said, there are two worlds. Aristotle said there's 9. But Aristotle's pretty fun. He's got his quirks too. He
Yeah.
said the stool is, in essence, the stool is trying to be the perfect stool. He, which I think
Yeah.
is a great idea. I like the idea, but
That's pretty
Some
funny.
stools are
it's trying desperately. It's moving toward perfection. We're all, according to Aristotle, everything is moving toward perfection, which I think is a
And
nice idea.
Socrates is just like somewhere else. I was eating lunch one time at my house, and my brother came down. This is like a year ago or something, and he goes, Spencer, I think I'm going to start calling you Socrates. And I go, why? And he goes, exactly.
Ah,
And
very
it was,
nice.
which is pretty
Yeah,
funny.
that's very nice. My father taught me the Socratic method when I was a kid. And I said, Dad, I learned that was the Socratic method. He goes, what's that?
The Socratic method, I definitely remember learning it, but isn't it just like asking why a lot? I don't know the exact.
It's his idea that you use it in class. A good teacher, I think, would use it in class. It's the idea that you ask someone questions until they arrive at the truth themselves, because they already know it.
That's. You can achieve a lot of the same stuff by just like talking. If we can really pull a rope back to whatever we were talking about before, there is my main belief is politically we all hold political beliefs, and for all of us, at least some percentage of the beliefs we hold, if we agree with the Platonic belief in a truth overall, we are all in some part not aware of the whole truth. And there is some beliefs in us that we can't really, there are some beliefs within us that are false. And the only way that we can acknowledge and realize that those beliefs are false is through conversation with people who disagree with us.
And admitting there's a truth to begin with.
And understanding that you are not the holder of all truth, which I think is closer and closer and closer to what we're getting with the indulgence in technology and humanist economies or culture or whatever it is. We're getting further and further away from that, so we're all just going back into our own, let's say, culturally, our own reality, because we all have different rules that we abide by, and we're able to abide by those rules because we don't have to be in society personally as much as we were in the past.
Okay, so let me see if I get straight what you're saying. You're saying there's a truth, and we don't know all of the truth.
Okay.
Is that what
Yes,
you're saying?
yes.
All right. And we ought to know that we don't know the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the problems with discerning the truth at this point is that we're not all hanging out talking enough.
Right.
I totally agree.
Yes, completely. That is interesting.
Well, there's a pretty easy answer to that one. Let's all hang out and talk.
I
Look at
definitely
what
think
you're
so.
doing, gentlemen.
There we go. High fives all
Brilliant.
around.
I want in.
Brilliant.
All right, why don't we use that as a little bit of a stopping point? I think that's pretty good. So thank you guys for listening to episode 4 of the Burning Bush podcast.
And I would like to thank Spencer, Sean, and Zach for having me on. I had a great time. Thank you,
Yeah.
gentlemen.
There you go. We'll see you guys next week. Thank you.